My sister's best friend falsely accused me of getting her pregnant and refused a DNA test, so I exposed the truth publicly and shattered her lie. Life was calm until one sudden event shattered my peace. My college roommate and best friend, Chloe, who is 20 years old, made an Instagram post claiming that I, her best friend's older brother, had gotten her pregnant. I checked the post, and it was complete with pictures of positive pregnancy tests. She even tagged me for good measure. I was utterly stunned. What kind of alternate reality was this? Here's the reality: I had never even met this Chloe in person. Our closest interactions were me seeing her on FaceTime calls with Alyssa during holidays or hearing Alyssa mention her occasionally. That's it. I had never spoken to her directly, let alone been in the same room with her. You can imagine my shock when Alyssa treated this like an undeniable fact, labeling me a deadbeat. What made it worse was that Alyssa wasn't just upset, she was completely convinced Chloe was telling the truth. She kept insisting Chloe wouldn't lie about something like this and that it was my responsibility to step up. Meanwhile, I was trying to process the entire situation. How do you even begin to respond when someone accuses you of something so outlandish? I tried explaining that Chloe was fabricating the story, that I'd never even spoken to her, but Alyssa wasn't convinced. Things escalated quickly. Alyssa stated that if I didn't admit it and provide financial assistance to Chloe, she would tell our parents everything. I don't have a bad relationship with my parents, but they tend to overreact, especially to something like this. The thought of them finding out about this predicament, especially since it wasn't true, was something I wanted to avoid. But what was I supposed to do? Give in to Alyssa and Chloe's demands for something I didn't do? The more I considered it, the more frustrated I became. Chloe didn't just create a small lie, she constructed an entire narrative. According to Alyssa, Chloe claimed I had been secretly messaging her on Instagram for months, then flew out to meet her a couple of times. She said we had been intimate during those secret visits and that now, after discovering she was pregnant, I was avoiding her. She even added this bizarre detail about me deleting all my messages so no one could prove we had been communicating. It was completely fabricated, obviously. I had never messaged Chloe, never flown to see her, and didn't even follow her on Instagram. None of it made sense, but somehow Alyssa believed every word. So, I suggested the first logical step in that chaos, a paternity test to clarify things. But Alyssa dismissed it, saying Chloe refused because it was an insult to her integrity. Seriously, if she was so certain I was the father, wouldn't she want to prove it? The whole thing just didn't add up, but Alyssa made it sound like I was being unreasonable for even suggesting it. I kept replaying it all in my mind, trying to understand how this even started. Alyssa and I had always been close, so seeing her take Chloe's side so quickly felt like a betrayal. She wasn't just siding with Chloe, she was fully committed. She texted me relentlessly, saying things like, "You need to take responsibility, and Chloe's dealing with enough without you making it worse." It didn't matter how many times I stated I wasn't involved, she just wouldn't listen. By then, I felt completely trapped. No matter what I said, Alyssa was convinced I was at fault. The worst part was her threat to tell our parents. They are traditional, and while I was confident they'd eventually believe me, the stress and turmoil it would cause were something I didn't want to face. I needed to find a way to prove my innocence without involving everyone else in this mess, but how could I do that when Chloe wouldn't even agree to a paternity test? By the end of the day, I was mentally, emotionally, and entirely drained. I had spent hours arguing with Alyssa, trying to get her to see reason, but it was like talking to a wall. Every time I pushed back, she'd respond more aggressively, saying I was avoiding responsibility and disrespecting Chloe. Meanwhile, I was left wondering how someone could construct such a massive lie and actually make it believable. That night, I sat down to plan my next move. Confronting Chloe felt like a trap, and involving my parents would only exacerbate the situation. But doing nothing wasn't an option either. I felt like I was balancing on the edge of a precipice, knowing one misstep could bring everything crashing down. At this point, all I knew was that I had to clear my name. But how do you prove you didn't do something when there's no evidence either way? It felt impossible, and the most disheartening part was that the person pushing hardest against me was my own sister, the one person I thought would support me in something like this was leading the attack. Tell me, what do you think I should do? I wanted to give you an update since things have intensified, and honestly, I have no idea where this is going. The next morning, after being declared a father without my knowledge, I awoke to even more chaos. I had a flood of notifications from Instagram and texts from unfamiliar numbers. Apparently, Chloe's post tagging me had gained significant traction overnight. There were dozens of comments on it now, many from people I didn't even know. Some were offering her encouragement, saying things like, "Stay strong, mama, you don't need him, girl." Others were harshly criticizing me, calling me various names and accusing me of abandonment. It wasn't just her followers, though. My own Instagram had become a battleground. People were tagging me in posts, stories, and comments, demanding answers. Some of Alyssa's friends, whom I had barely spoken to, joined in to express their disgust with me. One of them even sent me a direct message, a lengthy paragraph about how men like me ruin lives and that I'd better take responsibility before it was too late. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had spun out of control. This wasn't just some minor accusation anymore. Chloe had effectively declared war on me. The worst part was that I couldn't even properly defend myself because I lacked concrete proof. All I could do was state the truth, but when someone has already portrayed you as the villain, no one wants to hear your side. Things worsened when I saw that Alyssa had joined in. She wasn't just commenting on Chloe's post, she was making her own. She posted a story about family betrayal and how disappointed she was in certain individuals, clearly aimed at me. She also began tagging me in posts where she shared ambiguous quotes like, "Sometimes people show you who they really are, and blood isn't thicker than accountability." It was a full-blown public shaming campaign, and I felt utterly helpless. I wasn't the type to air my personal matters online, so the idea of retaliating or posting a lengthy defense didn't feel right to me. Plus, even if I did, it's not like I had anything substantial to back me up. All I had was my word against Chloe's, and she was already controlling the narrative. Throughout the day, I continued to receive texts and calls. A few friends called me, asking what was happening. Most of them believed me when I explained the situation, but even they admitted it looked bad from an outsider's perspective. "You need to resolve this," one of them said. "If you don't, it's just going to keep getting worse." But how was I supposed to resolve it when the only person who could prove I wasn't involved, Chloe, was refusing to get a paternity test? It felt like I was caught in a nightmare where the truth was irrelevant. By the afternoon, the stress was becoming overwhelming. I couldn't concentrate on anything because my phone kept lighting up with notifications. People I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me, asking if it was true. Some were supportive, but most were simply inquisitive or outright judgmental. At one point, I decided to block Chloe and Alyssa on Instagram, hoping that would stop the deluge of messages. It didn't. Chloe kept posting updates, tagging me in them, and people kept finding ways to reach me. It was relentless. Then Alyssa sent me a lengthy text. She accused me of being cowardly for blocking them and said it was just further proof that I was guilty. She said things like, "If you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't be running from this, and the least you can do is talk to Chloe directly and work something out." That last part truly infuriated me. Work something out? What was there to work out when I hadn't done anything? The fact that Alyssa still couldn't see how absurd this all was made me feel like I didn't even recognize her anymore. She wasn't just defending Chloe, she was actively trying to make me look worse, despite knowing I'd never met her in person. What truly pushed me over the edge, however, was when I discovered Chloe had started posting screenshots, not of our supposed conversations, because those didn't exist, but of random things like her pregnancy tests, doctor's appointments, and vague texts that didn't even involve me. She captioned them with things like, "This is what I'm dealing with while he hides," and "Some people think they can erase their mistakes, but life doesn't work that way." People completely fell for it. The comments kept pouring in, and more people were tagging me in their posts and stories. It felt like I was being publicly condemned for something I had no part in. By the end of the day, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Alyssa, hoping to reason with her. It didn't go well. She started yelling at me, saying Chloe was a good person who didn't deserve to be treated like this. I told her to pause and consider how insane this all sounded. How could I possibly be the father when I'd never even met Chloe in person? But Alyssa just kept reiterating, saying things like, "You're just upset because you got caught, and she doesn't need to lie about something like this." I ended up hanging up on her because it was clear we weren't making any progress. But even after the call, I couldn't shake the anger and frustration. Alyssa was supposed to be on my side, but instead, she was leading the charge against me. That night, I reviewed Chloe's Instagram again, trying to figure out why she had chosen me as her target. Was it because I had a stable job? Because I was Alyssa's brother and an easy person to reach? Or was it just random bad luck? Whatever the reason, it didn't change the fact that she had turned my life into a disaster. I knew I couldn't just let this go, but I also didn't know how to fight back without making things worse. If I reacted online, it would only add fuel to the fire. If I remained silent, people would continue to assume I was guilty. Either way, Chloe was winning, and I was caught in the middle of a storm I didn't create. My mind was racing, the stress of it all was overwhelming, and I couldn't see a way out. All I knew was that I needed to find some kind of evidence, something that would reveal the truth to everyone. But at this moment, it felt like I was completely alone in this battle. That's why I'm posting here at 3 a.m. I could definitely use some external perspective. Just when I thought this situation couldn't get any stranger, it did. But at least things are starting to become a bit clearer now. The other morning, I woke up to an unexpected direct message on Instagram from a guy named Brandon. To say I wasn't prepared for what he had to say would be an understatement. At first, I thought it was just another random person jumping into the chaos, but his message was different. He introduced himself as Chloe's ex-boyfriend and said he had something important to tell me. Honestly, I didn't know if I could trust him. This whole situation had made me suspicious of everyone involved, and I wasn't in the mood for more drama. But I wanted to hear him out. Brandon explained that he and Chloe had been together for 6 years, throughout high school and into college. They broke up recently, and it wasn't an amicable separation. According to him, the relationship ended because Chloe cheated on him with some guy she met on a dating app. He said he had found out through mutual friends, confronted her, and she admitted it. That was the end of their relationship. Here's where it got interesting. Brandon said Chloe tried to pull the same stunt on him just a few weeks ago after they broke up. She called him and told him she was pregnant. She insisted the baby was his and started pressuring him to propose to her. She even included this whole narrative about how they could make it work, how they owed it to the baby to be a family, and so on. Brandon told me he didn't believe her. He knew she had cheated and had no idea how many other guys were in the picture. He said he told her flat out to get a paternity test before he would even consider having that conversation. Chloe refused, saying it was humiliating and accusing him of not trusting her. That's when he officially cut ties and told her he wanted nothing to do with her. The way Brandon described it, it sounded like Chloe was desperate for a solution after he rejected her. She must have realized she didn't have a fallback plan, so when Brandon was out of the picture, she started looking for someone else to attribute the pregnancy to, and that's where I came in. Brandon's theory was that Chloe chose me because I was an easy target. I'm stable, I have a decent job, and I'm her best friend's brother. That gave her a connection to me that she could use to make her story more believable. Plus, according to Brandon, Chloe had mentioned me a few times during their relationship. Apparently, she thought I was attractive and had jokingly wondered what it would be like to date me. It was strange hearing that, but it made sense in a twisted way. Chloe wasn't just lying for the sake of it, she had carefully selected her target, and now, thanks to her manipulation, my life was in complete disarray. Brandon said he reached out because he felt sorry for me. He had seen Chloe's Instagram posts and knew she was lying. He figured I was experiencing the same thing he did and wanted to help. I didn't know whether to be grateful or angry. On one hand, I appreciated that someone was finally on my side. On the other hand, it infuriated me that Chloe had done this to someone else and was now dragging me into it. Brandon also sent me screenshots of their conversations from when she accused him of being the father. The messages were almost identical to what Alyssa had described Chloe saying about me, claims about avoiding contact, accusations of deleting messages, and refusing to take responsibility. It was like she had a script she was following, tweaking it just enough to fit her new target. The more I read, the angrier I became that Chloe was exploiting her situation to manipulate people. She wasn't scared or desperate, she was calculating. After reviewing everything Brandon sent me, I asked him what he thought I should do. He said the only reason he didn't expose the whole thing when it happened to him was because he still cared about Chloe, even after what she did. But he wasn't emotionally invested in this anymore, so he told me to take whatever steps I needed to protect myself. That's when I had an idea. if Chloe was refusing to get a paternity test, maybe I could use Brandon's story to force her hand. I asked him if he'd be willing to share his side with Alyssa or even Chloe's parents. He hesitated at first but eventually agreed. He said he didn't want to get involved directly, but he was fine with me sharing the screenshots if it helped clear my name. Armed with Brandon's evidence, I felt like I finally had something solid to work with. It wasn't proof that I wasn't involved, but it was proof that Chloe had done this before. If nothing else, it showed that her story wasn't as watertight as she made it seem. I spent the rest of the day organizing everything, Brandon's messages, the screenshots, and a timeline of events. I wanted to make sure I had all my facts straight before confronting Alyssa or anyone else. That night, I sat down and composed a message to Alyssa. I explained everything Brandon had told me and attached the screenshots as proof. I kept it concise and to the point, focusing on the facts instead of becoming emotional. Then I hit send and waited. I didn't hear back from Alyssa immediately, which wasn't surprising. I figured she'd need time to process everything. But I hoped this would finally make her see the truth. If she couldn't believe me, maybe she'd believe someone who had been in the exact same position. As I sat there, a whirlwind of emotions hit me. I was relieved to finally have some solid evidence on my side, yet frustrated that things had escalated this far. None of this should have happened, and while Brandon's help was a step forward, I knew the road ahead was still going to be challenging. Honestly, I felt a glimmer of hope, but I also knew the path ahead would be difficult. The next morning, I woke up to a response from Alyssa. Her reply was frustratingly brief and dismissive. She claimed the screenshots from Brandon didn't prove anything because Chloe had already told her he was a toxic ex who was just trying to ruin her life. Then she hit me with the classic, why would Chloe lie? What does she have to gain? That question almost made me throw my phone across the room. At this point, it was obvious Alyssa wasn't going to change her mind. She was completely convinced by Chloe's story, and no amount of evidence or logic was going to persuade her otherwise. I realized then that if I wanted to make any progress, I had to bypass Alyssa entirely. The only people left who might be able to control Chloe were her parents. I wasn't enthusiastic about the idea. I had never spoken to Chloe's parents, and from what Brandon had told me, they weren't exactly the warm and friendly type. Still, it felt like the only option I had left. If Chloe wasn't going to tell the truth, and Alyssa was determined to support her, then perhaps her parents could compel her to cooperate. I obtained Chloe's mom's contact information from Brandon, along with a warning that her parents were strict and traditional. "They're intense," he said. I wasn't sure what that meant exactly, but I figured it couldn't hurt to try. I spent the morning preparing everything I wanted to say. I wrote out a timeline of events, compiled all the screenshots Brandon had sent me, and practiced how I'd explain the situation. I didn't want to come across as aggressive or emotional, I just wanted to be clear and factual. Around lunchtime, I finally mustered the courage to call. Chloe's mom answered on the second ring. She sounded polite but cautious, like she couldn't understand why her daughter's roommate's brother was calling her. I introduced myself and got straight to the point, explaining that Chloe had been accusing me of being the father of her baby but refusing to get a paternity test. I also told her about Brandon and how he'd gone through a nearly identical situation with Chloe just weeks earlier. I explained that Brandon had proof Chloe was lying and offered to send her the screenshots if she wanted to see them. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Chloe's mom finally spoke, her tone had shifted completely. She said she had no idea any of this was happening and apologized for the stress it had caused me. She asked me to send her everything I had, screenshots, timelines, anything that could help her understand what was going on. I agreed, and as soon as we hung up, I forwarded her the email I'd prepared. An hour later, Chloe's mom called me back. This time, she sounded furious, not at me, but at Chloe. She said she'd had no clue her daughter was capable of something like this and assured me they'd be handling it immediately. She apologized again for the trouble and promised to keep me updated. I hung up feeling a mix of relief and unease. It felt good to finally have someone on my side who could actually do something about this. But still, I had no idea how Chloe or Alyssa would react once they found out I'd gone to her parents. The next day, Chloe's parents called me again. They'd spoken to Chloe and confirmed that she'd lied about me being the father. They apologized profusely for the trouble she'd caused and said they were taking steps to address her behavior. Chloe was back home with them and wouldn't be returning to college for the foreseeable future. They also mentioned that Chloe had tried to shift the blame onto Brandon and me, claiming we were ganging up on her to make her look bad. Thankfully, her parents weren't buying it. They said they were deeply disappointed in her and planned to cut her off financially unless she got her act together. Hearing that was satisfying in a way, but it also felt surreal. Just a week ago, I was living my life normally, and now I was at the center of this absurd drama. It was like living in some strange alternate reality. By the end of the day, I felt like things were finally starting to settle. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. Alyssa wasn't the type to let things go. I'm sure when she finds out, she won't stay silent, and Chloe had already proven she was willing to go to extreme lengths to get what she wanted. For now, though, I was just grateful to have some breathing room. I don't know what the future holds, but I hope this is the beginning of the end of this nightmare. After about 24 hours, the next morning, Alyssa showed up unannounced at my apartment. She was still enraged. The first words out of her mouth were, "I can't believe you called Chloe's parents. Do you even care about anyone but yourself?" I didn't even let her inside. I stood in the doorway and told her directly that I wasn't going to have this conversation again. I'd done what I had to do to clear my name, and if she couldn't understand that, then she needed to leave. But of course, Alyssa wasn't going to back down that easily. She accused me of ruining Chloe's life, saying she'd been forced to leave school, and now her parents were threatening to cut her off financially. Apparently, Chloe had confessed to lying about me being the father but framed it as a desperate move because she was scared and didn't know how to handle the situation. I told Alyssa that Chloe brought this on herself. If she hadn't lied about me, none of this would have happened. But Alyssa didn't want to hear it. She said I should have just let it subside instead of escalating things by going to Chloe's parents. She kept repeating the same phrases about how I overreacted and made things worse for everyone involved. At one point, she even said, "You've completely destroyed any chance Chloe had of fixing her life. Do you even feel bad about what you've done?" That was the breaking point for me. I told Alyssa that if she couldn't see how messed up this whole situation was, how Chloe's actions had hurt not just me, but also Brandon and even her own parents, then maybe she wasn't as logical as I thought she was. Alyssa became absolutely furious and left after that, slamming the door behind her. I thought that was the end of it, at least for the day. But later that evening, I received a call from my mom. Alyssa had gone straight to our parents and distorted the entire situation to make me look like the antagonist. She told them I'd targeted Chloe and ruined her life, omitting the part where Chloe lied about me being the father of her baby. My mom was upset, asking why I hadn't come to her and my dad first before taking matters into my own hands. I spent the next hour explaining the entire situation from start to finish, how Chloe lied, how she refused a paternity test, how Alyssa sided with her without any proof, and how Brandon's story confirmed Chloe was a serial liar. My mom listened quietly, but I could tell she was overwhelmed. She's not good with conflict, and this was far more drama than she's used to dealing with. My dad, on the other hand, was supportive. When he got on the phone, he said he couldn't believe Alyssa had been supporting someone who lied about something so serious. He was especially angry that she'd kept all of this from them until now. He told me he was going to have a serious talk with Alyssa and that he wouldn't tolerate this kind of behavior in our family. That brought me a sense of relief. The next day, Alyssa called me, furious as always. She said our parents had scolded her for siding with Chloe and threatened to stop paying for her college if she didn't apologize to me and cut ties with Chloe completely. Alyssa accused me of turning our parents against her and said I was just trying to ruin her life too. I told her, "You're the one who dragged them into this, not me. If you can't deal with the consequences of your actions, that's not my problem." That didn't go over well. She started yelling about how I was selfish and vindictive, and I ended up hanging up on her. Over the next few days, things between Alyssa and our parents worsened. My dad was adamant that Alyssa needed to take responsibility for her actions, while my mom was caught in the middle, trying to maintain peace. Alyssa refused to apologize to me or even acknowledge that she'd been wrong to believe Chloe. Instead, she doubled down, saying she was just trying to support a friend in need and didn't understand why everyone was ganging up on her. At one point, my dad told Alyssa that if she didn't cut ties with Chloe and apologize to me by the end of the week, they'd stop paying her tuition. Alyssa called me immediately after that, blaming me for everything. She said I was tearing the family apart and that I should have just kept quiet instead of escalating things. I didn't even argue with her this time. I just told her that I wasn't going to feel bad for standing up for myself and that she needed to take a hard look at who she was truly supporting. Chloe lied to you, to me, and to everyone else. Stop being foolish, I said. If you can't see that, then I don't know what else to say to you. By the end of the week, Alyssa still hadn't apologized. True to their word, my parents cut her off financially, just like what happened to the friend she supported. She called me one last time, crying and begging me to talk to our parents on her behalf. She said she couldn't afford to stay in school without their help and that she didn't want to lose everything over one mistake. I told her that I wasn't the one she needed to apologize to, it was our parents. They were the ones making the decision, not me. But Alyssa refused to see it that way. She kept saying I was the one who started all of this and that it was my fault her life was falling apart. After that call, I decided to block Alyssa's number. I couldn't keep dealing with her constant blame and refusal to take accountability. As much as it hurt to cut her off, I knew it was the only way to protect my own mental well-being. In the weeks that followed, my parents and I grew closer. The whole ordeal had been stressful, but it also made us realize how important it was to stick together and support each other. My dad even reached out to Brandon to thank him for coming forward with his story. As for Alyssa, I haven't heard from her since that last phone call. My parents tried reaching out a couple of times, but she didn't respond. I don't know if she's still in touch with Chloe or what she's doing now, but I hope she eventually realizes how damaging that friendship was. I feel like I've done everything I could to clarify the situation. Chloe's lies nearly destroyed my life, and Alyssa's unwavering loyalty to her made it even worse. If severing ties with both of them is what it takes to move on, then so be it. For now, I'm just focused on rebuilding my life and surrounding myself with people who genuinely care about me. If I hear anything new about Alyssa, it would be after 3 weeks since everything with Alyssa and Chloe finally erupted. Things have been quieter, but not exactly peaceful. Even though Alyssa and I aren't speaking, her absence still lingers. I never thought we'd reach a point where our relationship would be this fractured, but here we are. A couple of days after Alyssa's outburst, my parents gave me an update. Apparently, Alyssa had gone back to school, but she'd been forced to take out a student loan to cover her tuition and living expenses. My dad said she wasn't responding to their calls or texts anymore, which didn't surprise me. Knowing Alyssa, she's probably trying to prove a point by completely cutting them off. Part of me feels some sympathy for her. I know taking out loans and juggling work while in college isn't easy, but at the same time, she made her choice. She decided to stand by Chloe, even after the truth came out, and now she's dealing with the consequences. As for Chloe, I haven't heard a single word from her. According to Brandon, who's been keeping tabs on the situation, Chloe's parents have her on strict supervision. She's back home and isn't allowed to go anywhere unless it's for something essential, like a doctor's appointment. Brandon also mentioned that her parents are still furious with her for lying, but they're letting her stay under their roof as long as she follows their rules. Apparently, Chloe's still trying to portray herself as a victim. She's telling people she only lied about me because she was scared and didn't know how to handle the situation. She's conveniently omitting the part where she refused to take a paternity test and tried to manipulate multiple people into taking responsibility for her pregnancy. The craziest part is that Chloe still hasn't figured out who the actual father is. From what Brandon told me, she's been too afraid to contact the guy she was intimate with from the dating app, and she's still refusing to get a paternity test. It's like she's just waiting for the problem to magically resolve itself. I've been trying to move on from all of this, but it's been challenging. Even though the accusations have stopped, the damage they caused hasn't completely disappeared. Some people who saw Chloe's Instagram post still think there's some truth to her story, even though she's admitted she lied. Social media doesn't come with a rewind button, and once something's out there, it persists. My parents and I have grown closer in the wake of all this. They've been checking in on me more often, and we've even started having weekly dinners together. It's comforting to have their support, especially after feeling so isolated when everything was spiraling out of control. Last week, my mom brought up Alyssa again during one of our dinners. She said she misses her and wishes things hadn't escalated to the point where she felt the need to distance herself from the family. My dad, on the other hand, is still angry. He thinks Alyssa needs to learn the hard way that actions have consequences. For me, I feel like it's not my responsibility to reach out to Alyssa. She's the one who chose to believe Chloe over me, even when the truth was right in front of her. Until she's ready to admit she was wrong, I don't see how we can move forward. The hardest part of all this has been accepting that the relationship I had with my sister might never be the same. We were close growing up, and I always thought we'd have each other's backs no matter what. But this whole ordeal has shown me a side of her I didn't know existed, a side that values loyalty to friends over family, even when the friend is clearly in the wrong. If there's one positive outcome from this mess, it's that it's forced me to reevaluate my relationships. I've realized that some people, even the ones you think you're closest to, won't always support you when it truly matters. It's a difficult truth to accept, but it's better to know the reality than to continue living in ignorance. As for what's next, I'm taking things one day at a time. My main focus is on rebuilding my life and surrounding myself with people who genuinely care about me. I'm not holding out hope for an apology from Alyssa or Chloe, but I've accepted that I can't control their actions, only my own. This year, for me in general, has been tumultuous, painful, and draining, but I'm ready to move forward. I've done what I can to clear my name, and now it's up to the people involved to deal with the aftermath. All I can do is keep moving forward and hope for better days ahead.